Yeah, that's not it's not a normal trip combo, you know. There's surf and turf, motorcycles and mayhem, but not truffles and Dracula. Welcome to 10-Minute Travels. With me, as always, is Phil Freeman.
And with me, as always, is Shane Patrick. And today we're going to talk about hunting truffles in Romania. And if you want to hear more about that or anything else at 10 Minute Travels, just go to 10minutetravels.com.
Let's get right to it, shall we?
This week, we're going to focus on an Eastern European country, the country of Romania. And recently, Shane had the opportunity to go searching for truffles in Transylvania. And just want to ask him a few questions about that today and see what it's like to go over to the Eastern Bloc and search out the elusive truffle. Shane, why would you go to Romania?
Well, we were hosting a dinner party a few months ago, like back in January or so. And one of our friends who was there is a mycologist, and her husband is way into bird dogs. And she said, we are going to go to Romania on a truffle hunt with dogs, and then we're going to go to Dracula's castle for Halloween. Would any of you like to join us? And it didn't take very long for us to decide, yeah, we should do that. Why not?
What a great combo.
Yeah, that's not, it's not a normal trip combo, you know. There's surf and turf, motorcycles and mayhem, but not truffles and Dracula. You don't hear that very often.
And that's your first time to Eastern Europe?
It is. Yep. Yeah, I mean, I'd been to Europe, to Germany, so I'd been on the border. You could see Eastern Europe from where I was, but never crossed that line.
And what was the countryside like? And where did you focus in Romania?
So we flew into Bucharest and then took a little plane to Sibiu, which is to the south and a little bit east of there. And it's a bigger town, you know, a couple 100,000 folks. And that's kind of the western edge of Transylvania. And the countryside is, you know, if you were to look at a map, you'd see the latitudes are pretty similar to like northern Wisconsin. And so a lot of the plants were the same, you know, oak trees and maple trees, and they also have beech, but similar hardwoods and same conifers, but they have a little more topography. So not quite what we in Alaska would call mountains, but certainly hills that had very small trees growing on the top of them. So we were there in October, so you had the leaves turning colors, and more like Vermont would be, where the leaves are turning colors, but you have that topography, so you can see a big wall of painted carpet.
How did you find the people there?
They are nice, which is what I think people are everywhere. They're very direct, which can come across as rude if you're not ready for it. But I was just fine with that. I'm also very direct. I'll give you an example. Like if you're going out to dinner, the menus will be posted on the outside of the restaurant. It's common in a lot of places. It's a good idea to take a peek at that before you step in, have an idea what you want to eat. They're going to come and ask you for your drink order, and you should have one ready, because if you don't, you might not see them again for 20 minutes, an hour and a half. But if you are ready, they will take your drink order. They will come back with drinks, and then they're ready for your food order. So it's just, if you weren't ready for that, it would come across as rude, but it's more like they're not bothering you. If you want to just hang out and smoke cigarettes for an hour before you order, they're fine with that.
And having had a Eastern Bloc history, what was easy to define that you saw in the cities or countryside that you could tell that it had gone through a communist period?
Well, I think the dourness of their attitudes was probably part of that. And then certainly there's architecture, and every one of the bigger towns will have, like the city center was sometimes 800 years old type of architecture. And then it'll be surrounded by what we think of as that square concrete drab Russian thing that happened with communism. But on that note, you would see these big concrete buildings, like I say, drab, square, boring. But on the balcony, someone would have planted a grape plant, and the vines would go in either direction. So one person's watering that plant, but maybe 6 apartments are benefiting from that. And that'd be the only color on the side of the building. The women were very made up, perfect hair and makeup and manicured nails. But if you looked at their hands, you could tell that every one of them could chop more wood than I could chop. They worked.
And Romania is kind of an anomaly because it's a romantic language that's kind of tucked in the Slavic speaking sphere. And that came from, of course, when Rome had their empire stretched out that way. And but that language, even though it's romantic based, was it difficult to follow? Did you have much trouble traveling around?
Well, I tried to prepare myself before I went a little bit, just to get the basics, hello, goodbye, thank you, I need help, I'd like a beer, stuff like that, And I found it really difficult because of the way they use their accents. Like the letter A, for example, has, I think, 11 different pronunciations. So trying to read it is really hard. But speaking it was, it was easy enough, like any other romantic language, and it's similar, agua, apa, so it wasn't that big of a jump. But they have some other things that make it hard. It's a smaller country, about the size of Minnesota, give or take. And so everybody's got a little bit of something else in their language too. We were saying thank you one way, and one of the guys we were traveling with was saying it a different way. And we asked someone, a Romanian in a donut shop, actually, which one of us was right, because we wanted to do it correctly. And he said, you're both right. He's speaking Hungarian, but you're both saying thank you. Things like that.
Oh yeah, there's enclaves. If I don't forget, there's enclaves of Hungarian speakers that are in Romania.
That's
so
true.
You can drift across.
Yeah,
got that.
The Hungarians and the Romanians didn't really draw the lines on the map, so it doesn't fall in the right valleys the way, if you ask them, they don't get along with some of their countrymen because they're Hungarians and we're Romanians, even though they're right next door,
I did hear a story of a Romanian who had drifted into a Hungarian valley, and he just couldn't communicate with any of his countrymen. And I guess we all fall into that somewhere. It doesn't matter even in the United States, but it is pretty funny how the history has been washed back and forth on that country. And it's still there today.
Right. And if you think about, along those same lines, take a trip to Georgia in some little small town, and it's English, but is it English? And then one other thing that's pretty fascinating to me about their language is the use of curse words. They don't have them. They'll never drop an F-bomb. Instead of doing something like that, they will say, may your root vegetables rot, which is akin to, I hope you starve to death in February. So it's polite, but it's harsh.
And you traveled around a bit. How is the countryside, the roads? Did you go on buses? How did you get around, and how did you find traveling around?
We had a couple methods. We rented a van with a driver, and that was like it is in a lot of places. I fly helicopters for a living. I ride motorcycles. I like to be in control. And when you're in a rented van in another country, it's interesting, right? They don't drive the way we drive, more aggressively, whatever. So that was one thing. We rented cars, which was really easy. And then two of us rented a bike. We rented motorcycles for just a couple days to ride on their two most famous highways, which I would highly recommend. Whether you're on a bike or a car, it's pretty fun. The roads are mostly paved. They're not necessarily well marked. It's more like everyone knows where they're going. We had both a paper map and then your smartphone maps, and they all had numbers on them, for Highway 17 or whatever. But I never saw a street sign for Highway 17 until you got to the big city. Then the roads were marked more the way we would be used to. But at a crossroads in the countryside, no, if you need to ask directions, you have to ask how to get to the next town, and they would point you in the right way.
And it's easy to get pretty, relatively remote there. Once you get out of the cities, if I remember correctly, you are in pure countryside with tree-lined roads that go on for a long time. And it's funny that you should mention that. It brought me back a memory with no road signs at certain intersections, which is.
Yeah, and you're right. It does get remote quickly. Like there's a lot of sheep in that country, and the shepherds stay with them. You'll see little shacks around the countryside where the shepherd will sleep at night while he's out with the flock. So another thing when you're driving too, you maybe pull out to pass a little lorry, and you're like, I don't know if I can make it because the roads are pretty curvy. And then you get a shot where you can pass him. So you go out and pass the van, and then there's a Mercedes S model coming at you. So you zig back in front of the van that you just passed, and then there's a man driving a horse and a cart. So you had there's a big section of that population that's going to be absolutely fine if society crumbles, because they've been living the same way forever.
That was Shane Patrick, and we were talking about hunting for truffles in Romania. If you want to learn more about that or anything else on 10-Minute Travels that we talk about, please visit 10minutetravels.com.
And we want to remind you to make sure that your sense of humor matches your sense of adventure. Please like, subscribe, and share this podcast on all the platforms.